Is there a similarity between the biology of the eyes, the technology behind the internet, and the double entry system on which modern accounting is based on? The answer is yes. My objective is to make the dry subject of accounting juicy. The problem with the current single brain approach is that it goes directly to the point. It teaches the student how to make the journal entry for a particular transaction, then how to make the trial balance by adding up all those entries. Finally, it tells the student how to segregate the different headings into the three different financial reports. Such a mechanistic approach to teaching accounts would work for a computer and an algorithm, but humans need to be taught in the forebrain education approach. Even a seemingly standard and boring process such as making a double entry in accounts can be taught with excitement, layers of suspense to be unveiled, and with a sense of mission and unifying vision. This is what we will do in this section. The eyes follow a certain system whereby we see from two eyes, but it registers in the brain and we see a single image. So every sight is taken in from two inputs and converged into one output. That's a rule that biology created and executes without fail. If this rule was not obeyed, then we will not be able to see as we are now, right? Next, you must have heard about TCP and IP in the internet. It stands for Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol. Without going into the technical details, it is the rule that the internet uses to connect our phone or computer to the desired website. Then we can watch our YouTube videos or read our emails and check out our social media. In very short, what this rule does is break down data into many pieces for quick transmission and joins them again later on. Without following this rule, the internet as we know it today wouldn't be possible. It was developed by the father of internet, Vincent Cerf and Robert Kahn in the 1970s. Now let's compare the two analogies to accounts. The double entry system, which the main rule is the debit credit rule, is like the biology of the eyes and the TCP IP of the internet. All of them desired outcome without fail. While we will never be able to fully understand the rules of the eyes or of TCP IP, we can have a taste of discovering something as essential and basic as the wheel every time we make entries in the double entry system. Whenever somebody is being too creative, he is chided, telling him, don't try to reinvent the wheel. But here, I want to give you a glimpse of how it feels to have reinvented the wheel of accounting. Take a look at the diagram below. Don't be confused by all those boxes. It's all part of a big story. The story of the double entry system that you are going to learn here. This wheel was invented by Lucio Pacioli in 1494. At least he documented it in his book based on the practice of merchants in Venice in his time. If you are running a business, you want to know certain things about it. So let's go directly to the end of the diagram on the right side. There you will see the 3 financial reports. As a business owner, what I want to know is how much asset I have. Also like a breakdown, how much of that asset I have is cash, how much of it is account receivables, how much of it is equipment, how much of my asset is depreciating every year. I also want to know how much liabilities I have. Again, breaking it down. I want to know how much account payables I have and how much loan I have to pay. Finally, I also want to know how much equity I have put in, how much earnings I have retained. Now, for simplicity, this set of information we called the balance sheet. Next, I want to know how much revenue I made. Also want to know how much expense I incurred. Purchase, rent, depreciation. That would be my profit and loss statement. Finally, I would like to know specifically what's happening to my cash. How much my cash is inflowing and outflowing from operating activities, investing activities, and financing activities. Now, the beauty of Lucio Pacioli's double entry system is that he figured out a way to come to this final answer from distant and unseeming journal entries. However, in order to ensure check and balance option, designed the debit credit rule. As you already know, it's comparable to the biology of the eyes and the TCP/IP of the internet. For a simpler analogy, it's like mark sheet of a student. Everyone wants to have an A in all the subjects, the card. But if it was just to write down on that piece of paper at the end without following some kind of rules and protocols, there would be no value of that piece of paper. As a result, we have developed rules whereby the students need to study 1 year and have 80% attendance. Then they must appear in various tests and practicals and finals. Then one person will teach the course, another will write the exam questions, yet another one will check the papers. Finally, some other people will consolidate all the papers and simulate the marks into one single mark sheet. That's a system that the whole education system relies on. This is what Lucio Pacioli did on his own for accounting since the 15th century. Let's see how it's done using the examples of 8 transactions in the diagram. First, you must know the exact debit credit rule. For simplicity, we use the acronym DEALER. They represent the various information that we talked about earlier that a business owner wants to know about his organization. Lucio Pacioli was so smart, and you can see the discovery of the wheel happening. In order for double entry system to work, the 6 components in the DEALER acronym to be divided into 2 parts, like the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere in the diagram. Use this analogy so that it sticks in your mind. You might know when it's winter in Europe, North America, and my country Nepal, it's summer in Australia. I want to bring the theme of opposites using this analogy. In the DEA acronym, D stands for drawings, which is related to the owner removing money from the company. E stands for expense, and A stands for assets. Include all the subheadings that we discussed earlier. In this northern hemisphere, the rule is so simple. If you want to increase the amount for a particular heading, put that amount on the left column under the debit. If you want to decrease heading by any amount, then put it on the right under the credit column. The southern hemisphere acronym LER applies. L stands for liabilities, E for equity, and R for revenue. Again, that includes all the subheadings that we discussed earlier on. Since we are talking about money, we will need to always increase or decrease the amount in the various headings. The southern hemisphere seasons are the opposite, as we discussed earlier. So in order to decrease the amount, you put it on the left on the debit, and to increase the amount, you put it on the right under the credit column. Remember, if the computer doesn't follow the TCP/IP rule, your YouTube video won't play. And if the eyes don't follow the biology, you will be seeing double vision, I guess. Similarly, if you do not follow this debit credit rule, then you will not get accurate mark sheet of your business in the form of the 3 financial reports that we discussed earlier on. Now let's become an accountant. This is like the student sitting in class and giving exams in order to get A in his mark sheet. We'll go through the 8 transactions one by one very quickly. First one is the cash sales, and the transaction is the company sells good for cash. You'll have to refer to the diagram below for clarity. Each of the box contains a table of 4 columns. The first one is the date, the second one is the account, then the third and fourth is the debit and credit. Remember, debit is always put in the left and the credit is always put on the right. Yes, I don't have to tell you why. Just a rule that Lucio Pacioli designed in order to maintain the integrity of the accounting system, so that we can get a mark sheet that everybody can trust. As you will notice, in each of the transaction there is entries for a single transaction. This is the most beautiful rule that enables check and balance and makes it almost impossible to cheat. Must remember that in some transactions there will be more than 2 entries. So correct way to put it is the double entry system consists of at least 2 entries for every transaction. But here we are only making 2 entries. So for the first cash sales on August 1, the company sells goods for cash, then it has an effect of increasing the cash asset. As per the debit credit rule, we put the 5,000 that increase under the debit column, because asset, as we discussed earlier, belongs to the northern hemisphere. The second effect is on the sales revenue, which also increases, but because revenue is part of the southern hemisphere, we put that increased amount of 5,000 the left column under the credits. Now you understand, don't you? And we repeat the same process for the second transaction of the company purchasing goods on credit. It has an effect on purchase, which is an expense. Remember, it belongs to the northern hemisphere, and 1,000 we increase in expense is thus put in the debit column. Because we are buying on credit, the account payable increases. We learned earlier that heading belongs to the liability, which again belongs to the southern hemisphere. And in order to add anything in it, we put the 2,000 in the credit column. This way, we have recorded the purchase of goods on credit. In the third transaction, the company receives cash from a customer for a previous credit sale. source data is a receipt. The effect on the cash asset and account receivables both increases. So 1000 is added in the debit column for cash and the credit column for account receivables. The fourth transaction is the one where the company pays a supplier for a previous credit purchase. Here, the effect on the account payable, because it's a liability, decreased amount of 1500 is placed under the debit. So the other effect is in the cash, which is also decreased. Since it's in the northern hemisphere, that amount is placed under the debit column. The fifth transaction is when the company pays rent. The expense is in the northern hemisphere, and so the 800 is put on the debit column. It has also an effect on the cash, which is decreased by the same amount. This is also in the northern hemisphere. That amount is placed under the credit column. And we have the sixth transactions where the owner invests more cash into the business. It has an effect on the assets, cash, which is in the northern hemisphere. Since it's an increase, we put the 10,000 on the debit column. Equity, which is the southern hemisphere, also increases, and so we put that 10,000 under the credit column. Seventh one is record the company's depreciation for fixed assets. The effect is on the depreciation expense, which increases. Again, expense being in the northern hemisphere, 500 is placed in the debit column. This transaction has also an effect on the accumulated depreciation. The effect is on the credit here of 500. Finally, the eighth transaction is when the company obtains a loan from a bank. The effect is on cash assets. Being in the northern hemisphere, it increases, and so we put the 15,000 in the debit column. And the loan payable, which is a liability, which is in the southern hemisphere, also increases, so we put the same amount under the credit column. This way, it made 8 transactions and made the corresponding journal entries as per the debit credit rule and the double entry system. All this would lead to a trial balance whereby we basically copy paste all the tables as they are into a single table as shown in the diagram under the trial balance box. The only extra thing in that trial balance is the purchase of a computer equipment worth 3,000, which we did not include the transaction of here. By adding up same headings by cash, we get a total debit of 23,700, account receivable of 1,000, purchases of 2,000, rent expense of 800, depreciation expense of 500, computer expense of 3,000, account payable of 1,500, all are in debit. Then account payable of 15,000 on the credit, similarly of owner's capital of 10,000, sales revenue of 5,000, equipment depreciation of 500, and all under the credit column. Then the total balances to 31,500 on both the debit column and the credit column. This tells that all the entries were done accurately and no money or transactions was misplaced, either intentionally or accidentally. Then all those headings are segregated into the financial reports that we started this whole section with. This way, you have seen discovery of the wheel live. Isn't it beautiful, exciting? Every time you make a journal entry, no matter how tedious and boring it might be, remember that you are part of the history of accounting, starting from Lucio Pacioli in 1494. We can't play God and remake biology of the eyes. We aren't geniuses like Eaton Cerf and Robert Kahn came up with TCP/IP. But with every of our journal entries, the constellation of the trial balance the preparation of the three financial reports. We can feel the thrill of having invented the wheel of accounting, like the father of accounting did.